All right, here we are. Good evening. My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
We are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome. This is our monthly Patron Q&A.
Yeah, where we answer questions from our Patreon and from the community and all of those watching at home. So today we're going to be answering as many questions as we can and taking some questions from the audience towards the end. If this is your first time joining us for one of these, we usually reserve the questions from chat until the last little bit of these, and we're going to be going from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So hold on to your questions because we're going to start with all of our Patreon submitted questions and get through those and see how we do.
Yeah. So it's been quite a wild ride for us the past couple of weeks, but we got some fun questions tonight. And starting us off, Drogo Danderfluff asks us, what novel changed your life, Kelly?
I'm going to have the most boring answer. If nobody sees this coming, I'm going to be shocked. As a young kid, I had The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings read to me by my father when I was a wee lad. And then I read The Lord of the Rings again in my early teens. And really that is what captured my love for fantasy. But Monty and I were actually talking about this beforehand, and there are a couple book series that Monty mentioned that were also major points of my childhood that I think brought in my love for horror. So Monty, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
So when I was a young lad, like around maybe 8 years old or so, I'm trying to think if I might have been younger than this, because I think of how old I was now about like what house I was living in at the time, right? So I had to have been around the age of 8, no older. I read the Goosebumps novels, and I also read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was like an anthology of scary stories. Because like I remember being young. My grandmother had her home on Lake Huron here in Ontario. And so our sort of summer tradition was to go to my grandmother's house, which was on the lake, and make bonfires at night on the beach and tell scary stories. And my mom in particular, she had a lot of amazing scary stories that were ghost stories where she was always the protagonist in them. And I don't know to this day how many of them are just ones that she made up and how many of them have like a grain of truth to them. Right. But yeah, there was this kick as a really young kid where I loved those stories, and I would also add to that the other one, which I was too young for initially, but I got like in the adapted form, was T.H. White's The Once and Future King and the Chronicles of Narnia as well. Like as a young kid, like I had read those before reading The Hobbit, so I was already on like the path, right?
Yeah. I want to bring it back to Goosebumps for a second. Now, I also read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which I think I was telling Monty that my school library had the series of scary stories, and I would take them out of the school library constantly, and I'd just reread them over and over. With Goosebumps, I think Goosebumps was actually my first collection. It's the first thing I ever collected.
Yeah. I wonder if I have all my Goosebumps novels in a box somewhere. I think probably we donated them at one point.
I know.
But yeah, like I remember I'm trying to remember the titles. Like R.L. Stine, of course, was that. So yeah, it just really were those novels really reshaped me. What was your favorite of the Goosebumps novels?
So one that stood out, I had a lot of favorites for a lot of different reasons, but the one that I think actually scared me a lot was the Haunted Mask. There was the Haunted Mask Halloween one. And for some reason, I think there was, I'm drawing a bit of a blank here, but I think I remember it feeling like there was no way for the protagonist to win in that book. And it bothered me. I felt like in most Goosebumps book, you felt like they were moving towards a solution. But I feel like there were a few, and I want to say the mask one was one of them, but there's a few where it's not a good ending.
Yeah.
And that creeped me out more because I needed the kids to get out of it alive. But sometimes it didn't work out for them, and that creeped me out.
You know what? Another novel series just totally came to mind, and this is way outside the fantasy genre, so my apologies for this, but Sue Townsend's The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, just... oh my God, those books! I started reading. I don't know if any of you are familiar with these books, but The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole is written as a diary of this 13-year-old British boy growing up in the 80s, in like the late 80s and into the 90s. And so I started reading them around the time that maybe I was like 11 or 12. So I was really close to the age of Adrian Mole, and Sue Townsend continued to release Adrian Mole novels up. I believe she passed away a few years ago, and so the Adrian Mole novels aged chronologically with me as I grew up. And I remember always being like, I wonder how Adrian Mole's life is going, because I think that like it was almost like, I remember thinking at one point in my life, well, there's no point in me writing a diary because Sue Townsend already wrote my diary for me.
Right. I have one more book that I want to mention. I actually have it right here, so I'm going to grab it. But this one, we're talking about a novel that changed our life, not necessarily that inspired us for D&D. So yeah. I think this one's really important. 1 second.
Okay. Yeah. What is it?
All right. So Night by Eli Wiesel. It's really interesting to me. So this is a true story book. And what's really amazing for me is, for those of you who don't know, my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago, but she survived Auschwitz. And this book is the story that this guy tells. He grew up down the street from where my grandma lived. And he was taken to Auschwitz the same time as her. So it's really interesting that when you read this story, this is a very personal book for me. But when we're talking about books that changed our life, that book did change my life because he's an excellent writer. And if you want horror stories, man, is it a scary story. But literally it mirrors the stories that my grandmother told me growing up. So if you ever have a chance to read it and you want to see like what firsthand experience of surviving Auschwitz felt like, that's an incredible book. And I read it as a young kid. And then later my grandmother told me the story of what she went through. And I actually I almost, they're blurred together because they're almost the same story. So it's absolutely wild.
It's unreal to reflect about, though. Just talking to grandparents like that, especially those who, obviously your grandmother's experience is profoundly different from that of my grandparents. My grandfather fought for the Canadian forces in the Second World War, and incidentally, actually, this is a cool piece of history. Last week was I think the 79th anniversary of the Dieppe raid, which was a 1942 raid by the Canadian forces that was it was a complete disaster. And my grandfather was a survivor of that battle. And man, the stories that your grandparents tell you, though, those really influence you.
You know, this is going to be topping this topic off with a joke, but in Bo Burnham's Inside, when he's singing the song about turning 30, he says, when my grandpa was 27, he fought in Vietnam. When I was 27, I built a birdhouse with my mom. It really puts it in perspective that like you hear those stories and you're like, oh my God, like, was that real life? Like, I don't know. I'm not going to do anything like that in my lifetime. So
my grandfather lied about his age to enlist. He was only 17 when he enlisted. I think he was of age once he was at Dieppe, but he had wanted to be in the Air Force, and they told him to go back to school. And probably being told to go back to school before joining the Air Force, that probably saved his life, considering the way being a pilot in the Second World War was. But yeah, just amazing stuff. And so I think, like, you know, going back to that question of like what novels changed in your life, I think I do think that it is the compound effect of reading stories. And if anything comes out of this, I think the game advice, if you are a player or a dungeon master, is read more books and hear more stories. And I think the really compelling thing about this too is that I think it's about television and movies and video games are awesome, but we tend to consume stories in that format, whereas when we read stories and are told stories, we must digest them.
That was good.
Yeah. And so I think it holds deeper when you do that. Yeah.
So that's that question. Good question. Never been asked that. Next question we have from Olive Decat. How's your life after the Kickstarter? Less stressful or more stressful? For myself, there's been both a calm. I actually think it's both.
Yeah. There's been weird stress spikes here and there, as like small things come up, and definitely it's that kind of that moment of like, what's the next bit of stress that can emerge?
Yeah.
Right.
But I do think that we're back onto our regular, like, I show up on Tuesday nights to play D&D, and I show up on Wednesdays to film with Monty. I added on Mondays, get videos ready for the coming weeks. So I'm back. The wheels are turning at a regular pace now, and the machine is working at its well-oiled pace, where I feel like during the Kickstarter, the machine that is Monty and I was on overdrive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we're back to a well functioning machine.
Definitely had to collapse back into the familiar. I understand you have been replaying the Mass Effect games.
Yeah, a good solid 100 hours of playing all three Mass Effects has really helped me calm down. I busted out Skyrim again.
Yeah. So you just kind of have to retreat into the familiar, right? That's just the way of it. So tonight, after that little bit of fun personal question stuff, we've got some cool questions about character building and role playing, some dungeon mastering questions, and some Dragonheim questions. So why don't we kick things off with some of these questions that we have about character building and making characters. Some of these are pretty mechanical, but I think that'll be fun because we haven't done the questions like this in a while in a Q&A.
Is this person's name a person, or did you just write that?
I guess they're going by a person.
All right, so a person asked us, what mechanically is the best half ability score feat for a warlock? Shadow touched, fey touched, telekinetic, question mark. I think this comes to choice. I actually think they're all great feats, and it actually depends on what you want out of your character. I think that if you're trying to decide between shadow touched and fey touched, I feel like, are you an Archfey warlock? Because then Fey touched might be more thematic, but does it give you what you need? Which do you prefer, Misty Step or Invisibility? I actually don't think there's a solid answer to this question. I think any of them, depending on the flavor and the theme and what you're hoping to accomplish with your character.
I think the answer to this question is just yes.
Yes, they're all great.
Yeah, they're all great. It is going to come down to the specifics of your character. So, obviously, if you're playing a great old one warlock, you probably don't need to take telepathic. And I do think that maybe you want telekinetic, but a thing to consider with telekinetic, of course, is that as a warlock, you can get forceful blast. So you're going to be able to move people with your Eldritch Blasts anyways, if that's what you're looking for, and you can still learn Mage Hand. So I would also put the actor feat in this list, depending on where you're going with your warlock.
I mean, Joe.
I think that if you're an elf or half elf, probably Elven Accuracy is the clear winner of all of these ones. Of like the one that gives you a half ability score boost. Yeah. But beyond that, with the exception of Elven Accuracy, I would say I think Elven Accuracy, probably Shadow Touched and Fey Touched are up there. And then Telekinetic and Telepathic being less so. Actor being a bit of a wild card in there.
Fair. Do you have thoughts on this one? Is from Jake. Do you have thoughts on fixes for any of the subclasses you gave a D or C ranking? Will this be a potential video series going forward? So I will say that it could be a video series going forward, how to fix the non-great subclasses. Monty and I have talked a lot about this. Let's go for one.
Okay,
you fix one and I'll fix one.
So
we'll do a few.
The ones that we gave D tier rankings, though, to were the original Beastmaster, the Berserker Barbarian, the Way of the Four Elements Monk. Did we give it?
Dragon
and the Purple Dragon Knight. Yeah.
I think there's other ones in there, but also like when we gave a D, for example, to a Bard, I still think that it's a good Bard.
Oh yeah, the Swords Bard and the Swords Bard and the Whispers Bard. Okay.
But they're still good.
Okay. Since the Swords Bard and Whispers Bard, I don't know if the Swords Bard is still D tier to me. I think maybe it's C or B.
I still think Whispers is a C and not a D. But
I think Whispers is definitely a D still, though. Yeah. Okay, so pick one. What do you want to do?
All right. Way of the Four Elements Monk. I'll tackle. I think that the simple solution to fix the Way of the Four Elements Monk is Monty and I have talked a lot about how great it would be if we had a half-caster monk, similar to the way that the Eldritch Knight or the Arcane Trickster works. So I think that the better way to have gone with a Four Elements Monk was to give them half casting. And I also think that they should have some sort of ability where they can use key points to combine their punching, kicking, and spell casting.
combo strike. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I'm gonna say, rapid fire. Way to fix the Berserker Barbarian. Just drop the exhaustion thing. That's pretty much all you need to do there, and you're done, right? I think you're probably fine to do that.
We've also talked a lot. Beastmaster and Hunter should actually be baked into the Ranger class.
Yeah, you could just bake those in.
All Rangers should get a Beast and the ability to choose some cool Hunter abilities, and it wouldn't break the Ranger.
Purple Dragon Knight, the reason why it's a D tier is because all of its abilities are tied to Action Surge, Second Wind, and Indomitable. So you make those abilities just usable on their own a number of times per day equal to the proficiency modifier or ability score modifier of the character, rather than tying them to Action Surge and stuff like that, right?
How would you fix the Whispers Bard? I don't think it needs to be that fixed, but I want to hear your opinion.
Okay, here's how I would fix the Whispers Bard. The Psychic Blades ability would be separate from Bardic Inspiration. You wouldn't have to spend Bardic Inspiration to activate Psychic Blades. That's the same thing that I would do with the Swords Bard as well. I think that making those abilities key off of Bardic Inspiration is not good. So I would just make it proficiency modifier for both, right? Okay. And with it regaining on a short rest. For the Whispers Bard, the biggest thing is that ability, that infiltration ability, where like you are there when somebody dies and then you get to assume their identity and do all this stuff. That just needs a complete rework so that it is actually usable at all, because as written, here's what my challenge to anybody with this ability is like, a Whispers Bard is going to take probably invisibility, suggestion, detect thoughts, and disguise self already, and so I think that a Whispers Bard is not saving any spells by having this power. I just think that this power needs to be way less restrictive, and it needs to be rewritten in some way. Like, it just isn't it's just too narrow in application, and it only helps you in an infiltration scenario where you want to kill somebody. And very often when you are infiltrating, you don't want to kill anybody, at least not until the very end, right? And so it even brings up all those issues of like, you still have to, like, if you want to kill a guard to become the guard, right? Well, now you have to get that guard alone. You have to be there when they die. You have to kill them without raising the alarm. You could do that, or you could just cast Disguise Self. So the whole act of trying to use your ability creates a situation where you could get caught.
Yeah, fair. Okay. Yeah. So there's some fixes for some D tier subclasses. Let's move on to the next question here, because actually I know that we talked about this earlier, and we have some great... Monty's done some great math on this. Can you develop your position about a multi-class Artificer, Battlesmith, and Bladesinger? In my opinion, the possibility to use your int as attack modifier from the Artificer can be a great addition to the Bladesinger and vice versa. Before Monty goes off on what I know is a great dissection of this multi-class, I will say that if you are running a high-level one-shot, go for it. Cool. But if you're planning a full campaign, I'll let Monty take it away there.
So let's start out. Let's just say, okay, we're gonna make a character we're gonna make a character with point buy. Okay, so you're gonna start off with a 16 intelligence, and if you're gonna go the single class Bladesinger, you're gonna end up with a 16 dexterity. Okay, and if you are gonna do the multi-class, you might not put your dexterity this high, but you still might have it. You still might have it fairly good just because you want the AC bonus, right? So let's take a look at the key things to make this multi-class work. Okay, you need 3 levels of Artificer in Battlesmith to get the feature that lets you use your intelligence when you're wielding a magic weapon. Okay, so the first thing is that you have to use a magic weapon in order to gain this benefit, which arguably means it doesn't work with Shadow Blade. So you can't use Shadow Blade now for this because you have to have a magic weapon, right? But that's neither here nor there. You have to have 3 levels of Battlesmith Artificer. And when do you actually start attacking on a rate? Like, when does it really start to become good? Well, when you get extra attack as a class feature, which either you need to now take 5 levels of Battlesmith, but really you want your 6 levels of Wizard to get your Bladesinger Wizard thing. So at a baseline, this build comes online as a level 9 character, where you are a level 3 Battlesmith and a level 6 Bladesinger Wizard. Okay? This character has only gotten 1 ability score increase because of the way the 3-6 builds out at level 9, as opposed to the 2 that they would have if they were a single class wizard. So already the Bladesinger that could have had a 16 int and a 16 dex to start could have raised those both to 18, and you only got to raise your int to 18. So no difference there. Your attack modifier isn't any better than if you just single classed. But not only is your attack modifier not any better than if you had have just been a single class Bladesinger, but the single class Bladesinger has a fifth level spells, right? And has been attacking twice for 4 levels now. Whereas you, as your Battlesmith Bladesinger, you have 4th level spell slots, but you can only cast 3rd level spells. So you can't cast Wall of Force. You can't cast Animate Objects. You can't cast Dimension Door. You don't have those higher level spell slots to do this. Sure, you can still cast Haste. You can still cast Shadow Blade, which you can't use. So you're cutting yourself off. So look at the comparison of what happened, and look at the route to get here. Like, look at how much of a mess this is. You don't have extra attack until level 9 at the earliest. Or if you want it sooner than that, you had to like do something like, how do you level this character up? Like, where are you gaining your levels, right? Because it's not until level 9 that you both have extra attack and the thing, and the attack twice. I guess you could go the other way around, and you could level up your Battlesmith levels and just take the 2 levels of Bladesinger, and you can be Bladesinger level 2, Battlesmith level 5. But that doesn't feel like a Bladesinger anymore. That just feels like a Battlesmith that took 2 levels of Bladesinger, right? So apologies if I'm missing something here, but this is a build that works really well at high, that only works if you skip the sweet spot of D&D.
Fair enough. Again, if you're doing like a high level one shot, like if you're playing a game at level like 10 or 12 or something, then by all means try this out. But it's building that character. You're going to play over half the campaign being pretty much weaker than everybody else on the battlefield. And this actually relates to our next question. Is there a reason why you almost never talk about multiclassing in your videos? For me, the reason for this is twofold. Number one, multiclassing is the most potential for confusion, frustration, and either making characters that are too powerful for the game or substantially weaker for the game. And you really need to know the ins and outs of how multiclassing is going to work in order to properly do it. Should we do a video on what you should look for a proper multiclass? Probably. There's a whole avenue of videos that we could do on multiclassing, but it almost feels like a can of worms that we just haven't been ready to open up yet. Because once we do, there's like a floodgate of content. Number two, I've had the benefit of playing almost every class in Dungeons and Dragons at least a bit for at least a few sessions. I haven't had the chance to play every multi-class because there's so many combinations. So I don't want to talk about what I don't know as well.
And that's just it, is that so many multi-class builds look great on paper, but are very theoretical. I think like this aforementioned example, it's like, yeah, that would be a great combination, but here's the problems, right? And especially with a lot of multi-class builds that rely on, that don't really come online until level 8 or 10, level 8, 9, or 10. Well, the sweet spot of D&D is level 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And to a lesser extent 10, like that tier 2 play. And if the multi-class build is not working prior to tier 2, I think it really, you run the risk of some weird things happening. There are some powerful multi-class builds that work right out the gate, like where you take it one level of something and then you just go from there. But those are more like dips than true multi-classing, right?
Yeah, like I think a 2-level dip into fighter is always a great option. Or, a lot of people will take 1 level of cleric to get certain elements from there. And these are actually my favorite versions of multiclassing. Is when you like I'm not going to lie, a lot of rogues can do a lot with 2 levels of fighter in their back pocket. And there's like a lot of great options like that. Let's move on to the next question from Leviathan Guy. This was actually a tough question. I think there's a bit to dissect here. The question is, I'm planning on playing a character with an evil alignment who is a serial killer. And at the same time, my buddy will play an investigator who's looking into my murders. I want to do everything in my power not to be a murder hobo. Any advice? I'll start off, and Monty, I'll see if you have anything to add to this. So first of all, I hope that everybody at the table is okay with you playing an evil aligned character. If that's the case, great. If you're surprising everybody at the table with you being a serial killer, that actually might be problematic. There is something to be said for a table that endorses and encourages player conflict. A lot of tables don't love this. So again, you want to be careful with this. Does everybody at the table know that you and this other player are going to be discovering each other's secret and possibly wanting to take each other out? Is your investigator player, is their end goal to find you and capture you or kill you? Because if that's the case, this is dangerous territory for a game of D&D, unless, again, everybody's cool with it. For the second part of this question, which I think is the one that has the easier answer, because the answer to the first part is really, you're going to have to make sure everybody's cool with what's going on there, because it sounds like something that I wouldn't love at my table, but I know that other people out there do enjoy this. But for the second part, everything in your power not to be a murder hobo. I actually want to look at a great show, and when I say great, I mean from seasons 1 to 4, it's great, and that's Dexter. In my opinion, Dexter ended after season 4. We don't talk about the other seasons. But anyway, Dexter was a serial killer who had to satiate his need to kill. But in order to do that, he was very explicit about who he killed. And I think that if you don't want to be a murder hobo, a serial killer character, try to find a way to make them have a code of conduct. There's a reason why they do what they do, and there is a like guidelines that they follow on who they're going to kill. So that way you're not killing everybody. You're finding like, I like to kill evil necromancers. Well, okay, now feed it into the campaign. Find out what the campaign's about and make your character want to kill maybe people more powerful than him, or maybe people more dangerous than him.
I think Kelly, you're hitting on a key thing, is that a serial killer, if you're actually wanting to talk about like the modern concept of a serial killer, which kind of begins with like a figure like Jack the Ripper or something like that, a serial killer has a type and a ritual. They don't just kill anybody. Like, it could be, your serial killer only kills spellcasters, and they only kill spellcasters under the full moon in a specific place and in a specific way, right? Like serial killers have weird rules with how they act and how they behave and when they kill. And so if you want to play a serial killer and that's what you want to do, you should, and you don't want to be a murder hobo, then that's the difference between, like, if you're just a random psychopath that's just like gonna like kill anybody that makes you angry or that looks at you the wrong way, you're just a psycho. Like, that's just it. Like, you're just you are a psycho murder hobo, right? Whereas a serial killer in like the more literary sense, I think has not to give the benefit of a serial killer being more having, I guess, to take a page out of Hannibal Lecter, a serial killer has discerning tastes.
You don't want to be Carnage from Spider-Man. You want to be I don't even know if I want. Well,
you're not even the Joker, no, because the Joker's
a bit of a psycho.
Yeah,
he's reckless and chaotic.
Exactly. You should probably draw more inspiration from Dexter and Hannibal Lecter and Buffalo Bill, and actually, please don't play a character like Buffalo Bill. Like, actually don't do that. Like,
I think Dexter is actually the safest bet here.
And honestly, like, this is one of those things where like you really need to check with your group and make sure that they're on board with this, because you could be taking into territory that people are just uncomfortable with. And I will also say, like, do not, like, if you wanted to be a serial killer that involved anything involving like any sort of sexual assault component or children, I would be videoing that character. So don't even go there. Like, don't go there, please. For the sanity of your dungeon master and everyone playing at your table, do not go there with it, right? And that would be my final thing with this is, I know you've talked about this concept with the other player that's going to be the investigator, but I hope you've also checked in on it with the other players at the table, because I have to say that if I were playing in a group of people, like, that would be one of the things where I would say myself as a player, I'd be like, actually, I don't want to play in a campaign with this character, right? So please make sure that you have discussed it thoroughly with your group.
Good talk. So next up we have Adam J, who asks, I was wondering...
Are we getting into the...
yes.
Yes, because those are the Dragonheim questions. We're getting into the DM questions next. Adam J, we'll come back to you soon. Don't worry.
Oh, we're doing...
Yeah, we're going to do the more mechanical...
Dungeon mastering.
Yeah,
okay.
The DM tab.
I'm clicking on the wrong section.
Yeah,
guys.
I think cosmology is next.
Okay, cool. We're going to do a question from cosmology. Don't worry, we'll get to the Dragonheim questions soon. Any advice on how to prep for open path campaigns? I want to make a lot of locations, strategies, and options available to my players, but I find myself devoting a lot of time to encounters that the party never ends up facing.
Welcome to the club.
I actually, okay.
Welcome, you are now a DM. You can find, there is no free coffee, there is no free candy. This is just the life of the Dungeon Master. Enjoy.
Prepare to make 400 adventures that nobody ever touches.
Yeah.
But okay, I will say that I've suffered this fate multiple times with trying to make my own homebrew open-ended world. The thing is that us as dungeon masters, we're all probably a little notorious for over-planning. Mm-hmm. We want to try to figure out what's going to happen if the players go here, 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 or here. The thing is that you need to get really good at being able to work off of really little. And this is a skill that comes with time. And I've actually, I found myself doing the exact same thing in an upcoming campaign that I'm going to be running for a group. And I'm trying to make it really simple, but I already found myself over planning. And I was like, okay, Kelly, you know that you can just whip up a dungeon the day of the session and figure out what the characters want to do that session. This is actually something that we do for Dragonheim that's really important. If you want to run an open-ended campaign, finish off each session by asking your players, what are you going to want to do next? And hold them to it. Once they've told you as the DM, okay, next we're going to go to Mount Doom to get rid of this stupid ring that we have. Well, now you as a DM knows to prepare Mount Doom for next week. And your players and you need to trust each other that when you ask them, okay, where is this going next week? Then, and they tell you, you need to stick to that, because now you as a dungeon master get to work on that. And that's actually a great way to do an open-ended campaign. The players still get their choice, but now you know what to prepare next. And other than, you don't have to prepare everything. Like if I'm doing an open-ended campaign, I'll make point form notes for each location. It's like Mount Doom is guarded by an evil ancient lich who's super powerful and has a giant eye that he can watch the area around Mount Doom with. And it's filled with orcs. There, those are my notes. When the characters say, now we're going to Mount Doom, then I'm like, all right, time to whip out the old binder of ideas that I have, pick a few good ones, put them around the area, and actually build the encounters and design the adventure for next week.
Kelly makes great points, right? That ultimately you only need to stay one session ahead of your players, right? But I'll offer a few things. How many locations do you really need to make the world feel open-ended and to make the players feel like they've got a lot of choice? 3 to 5. Anything more than that, and the players have too many choices and they will get decision paralysis. So you do, like, even if you want to do an open-ended world with lots of places for the players to explore, at any given time, really you like stick to the, like, you can suggest, oh yes, like there's Castle Draken off there in the background and there's the Academy Tower, but do you think that I designed Castle Draken when the players were exploring the Rat's Nest? No, by no means had I done that. So you suggest the far off locations, but the ones that the players can actually get to, like the ones that are like over here and stuff like that, you're ready for that. Like you're ready with the walls, there you go. Right. And so, you prepare them in phases, right? So if you want to have a big world, like Dragonheim, which has like 20, prepare them in waves of 5 or 6. And okay, well, these are the tier 1 locations, these are the tier 2 locations, these are the tier 3 locations. And for yourself, you can also allow like half of those locations, just steal them from another existing adventure. Like maybe you just rename one of the adventures from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or you rename your favorite thing that you found in Rime of the Frost Maiden, or you grabbed an Adventures League module, or you stole one of the locations from the Dragonheim book and decided to use that. So have a library of things that you can use and reuse in a variety of contexts, and rely on those so that you don't have to design everything whole cloth. And then just remember that, like at that point, like you've narrowed it down. And so that like the 3 or 4 locations, follow Kelly's advice where he said, like, prepare just the beginning part of each location, because like it's going to take your players more than one game session to explore any of these places. So and I would also say to that is like anything that the players are going to like, it's not like, make sure that it's going to be meaty, right? Like you do that as well by saying like any one location that your players explore, you can count on you as a DM. It's going to take them like 1 to 3 game sessions. So you could literally have a circumstance where the player characters are exploring level 1 of the dungeon and you haven't just finished you're still, finishing painting level 2, but that's okay because you only have to be 1 game session ahead of them. And if and you don't need to do too much railroading or anything like that to reel that in either.
Curmudgeon Master asks, what are some ways to avoid having too many NPCs adventuring with the party without isolating them somewhere without capable NPCs? My players eagerly recruit them, and I'm out of excuses. I'm already running 2 to 3 NPCs within a party of 4 adventurers. This is going to be some hard truth. Stop making NPCs that are capable adventurers and willing to go into dangerous situations.
Your NPCs are busy. Your NPCs aren't necessarily willing to risk their lives. Your NPCs, a really great thing to say is that like even NPCs who are high level wizards and clerics, well, just because you're a level 5 wizard, if you're an NPC, maybe you got to a level 5 wizard because you spent years just studying and you didn't level up like an adventurer did. Like, I like to think of it as that the only people in the game world who can gain levels with experience points the ways adventurers do are the protagonists. Everyone else kind of has to learn their stuff. So like, yeah, this wizard can cast teleport and dispel magic and polymorph, but they have a constitution of 10, a dexterity of 10, a strength of 6, and are scared at the sight of their own blood. Right? The priest, the local cleric, they can't go to the dungeon. They have mass on Sunday, right? Like they can't give up their duties to just come along with you. And if it gets to this point as well, if they're going to add NPCs to the party, those NPCs, they want a share of the treasure. They want a share of the experience points. They want to have their thing. And finally to that, I would just say like, I kind of have an unspoken rule at my game table. And you might have noticed this if you watched the show, that during combat encounters, the NPCs that are following the party kind of just fade into the background a little bit. Like they don't really do anything useful. Maybe they give out a buff or something like that. But yeah, your players are collecting a menagerie. And if you find that these techniques don't work, you just might want to say to them like, listen guys, I'm really sorry, but I know it makes sense, but it's getting a little bit too much to manage all these NPCs, and you can just be open about it.
Yeah. I will say, and I'm going to use Mass Effect as a reference here because I'm playing the hell out of it right now. But in Mass Effect 3, a lot of the characters have other things going on. So like one thing in Mass Effect 3 is you meet up with characters that you love from Mass Effect 2. And you're like, you should join my crew. And they're like, well, these people over here really need me right now. I'm their commander at this point. So I hope you understand, but I got to stick with them. And your NPCs can do this, like make them have something that they need to take care of. If you have a valiant commander character, then they have their troops that are on their own mission that maybe is separate from the character's mission. Well, the characters are about to sneak into a dangerous location. But meanwhile, we have a war that we're fighting at the same time, and I need to be on the front lines with my men. And if you do that, it means that they can't go with the party. The party is always the secret ops. They're the special black ops troops. They're the ones going on the dangerous, deadly mission where only 3 to 4 people can go. But all these other NPCs, they need to be on the front lines. They need to be giving orders. They need to be dictating moving parts.
Somebody needs to hold the line. Somebody needs to guard the castle. Somebody needs to make sure that the supplies get through. Somebody needs to cook dinner. There's all these other things that the NPCs can be doing that make them still helpful, but they're not the ones following around in combat, right? And to that, I would also just say to the players, like, maybe one of you guys wants to control this NPC instead, and that can be your PC now instead of your original character. If you think that this person should follow your party, maybe one of your other characters retires and switches out. So it's okay for a couple NPCs to be to follow the player characters around, but you don't draw the line somewhere. And one of the things that you can always do if you're really at a loss for it is just have that NPC pair off with another monster in the combat encounter, and that NPC just does their thing, and those two monsters are fighting each other, and then it works out by the end of the fight, so that you just kind of push them to the side. Right?
Dank Snail asks, what are some of the best DM resources when preparing locations and adventures, both from Wizards of the Coast and third parties?
I mean, the Dungeon Masters Guild is an invaluable resource, and so it is. There's a lot of paid content on there, but it is worth checking out. I would say, in terms of invaluable resources that I use endlessly all the time, YouTube is the other one, but you're here.
Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to the internet.
I would add to that many of the Discord communities, such as ours, our Patreon Discord, which you are already a part of, are awesome. Even more to that, there's a lot of other great Discords that are in the D&D space. A lot of other D&D YouTubers do cool Discord communities that are filled with resources. There's a lot of great Facebook groups. I am not really a fan of Facebook, but I gotta say there's some good Facebook groups where people do communicate and share resources. A lot of the smaller ones are better. I can't really recommend any offhand, but there's good ones out there. And I would also just say that as far as the official source books are concerned, I think that for a dungeon master, Volo's Guide to Monsters, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes are particularly useful, and I'm pretty happy with Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft too. Do you have anything else you want to add to that, Kelly?
What I will say is specifically for preparing locations and adventures, Monty and I just filmed a great video that's coming out in a few weeks for dungeon design. And one of the things we talk about in there, I don't want to spoil the video, but if you have a favorite map artist who has a Patreon or anything like that, if you join their Patreon or find their kit of maps, a great way to get inspiration for locations and adventures is to find a cool map and build your way out from there. So Monty and I are big fans of Dice and Logos, and we look at their maps all the time. And, you can find a map for anything and then, adapt it to what you need it to be. So that's a great that's a great kickoff point for locations, is follow your favorite map makers.
Yep. And you can even just start by doing a search for like fantasy maps in Google, and you will get pulled down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cassador asks, I've switched my current campaign from an experience-based leveling to benchmark-based leveling.
I think milestone milestone. Yeah.
I'm having trouble figuring out how much time or how many missions would equal the experience for a level. My players are currently level 5.
We did a video on this.
We did.
We did a whole video on it, so check that out. The short answer is, what do we say, 3 to 5?
3 to 5, and that should be around the same length as your adventure arcs. So, like, the characters arrive at a location, they have a thing to do, they do the thing within 3 to 5 sessions. Once they're done the thing, you're good to go. If you're watching our live stream, do not use that as a great example, because we are very beholden to the story for leveling up, and we don't care how much time we spend on a level. We'd rather tell a good story. So you may notice that we go like 10 sessions without leveling up. That's just because that's
you guys have done a lot of talking. I
know.
Lately.
I'm not complaining. We have all agreed to this. So, but 3 to 5 sessions is usually our benchmark.
Crush It wants to know if we have any recommendations for running a campaign that leads into the darker side of the Fae and fairy tale tropes trying to stride the land between being cutesy fairy tale and going deeper into dark fantasy. I have some starting ideas.
Yeah.
What do you? But do you have anything?
I think in this case, if you want some inspiration, ignore Disney and look at the root of where a lot of the Disney stories came from. Look at the root of like the Brothers Grimm tales and things of that nature.
Read actual Slavic folklore and Norse mythology, and possibly also Beowulf. Right? Like reading like the real source, like go to the source material for a lot of these. Read actual Lady Gregory's Celtic mythology is a great place to start. I would also say, if you really want to nail it, if you really want to nail dark fantasy, everyone has to play a human.
Or almost everyone.
Yeah. You could have one non-human in the party, but to me, that's the secret sauce for nailing dark fantasy, is that all the protagonists should probably be humans.
You'll hear us say this a lot now. Like we're about to release Dragonheim to the world, and everybody's going to play whatever they want. But when we run Dragonheim, we're very much structured around the humans, half humans, and mostly human races, because it makes the otherness of the world feel scary and weird.
Yeah, and greatly magnified. I would also say the later Dresden Files stuff does some dark stuff with fairies, from what I understand. Monocrown says, wait for Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I have to say, as much as I think Wild Beyond the Witchlight is going to be cool, I will be very surprised if it comes out feeling like a dark fantasy story. I somehow think it's gonna end up being more of a farce. I don't know. I know the art direction doesn't indicate that, but I don't know.
I feel like Wizards of the Coast treats the Fae as somewhat. They do treat it as dangerous. There's no doubt about that. Like the Feywild is dangerous, but they don't dive into the whole like fairies are going to kill you, satyrs are going to trick you into killing you. Everything in the Feywild is going to murder you while messing with your mind.
Yeah.
And that's something that we don't see a lot in core D&D, is the actual cerebral horror of the Feywild.
Yeah, like even Candlekeep Mysteries, it keeps things pretty whimsical. And whimsy, there's a place for whimsy in dark fantasy, but whimsy is kind of like the order of the day right now. And as soon as things get too whimsical, you just lose you know what I mean? Yeah.
I want my Feywild to present itself as whimsical so that when you arrive, you're like, oh, am I in a wonderful place? Is this heaven? And then, you stay for a little too long and realize that it's one of those situations where once you're there and you think you love it, now there's no escape and you're trapped and you realize how badly you don't want to be there anymore.
I think Benicio del Toro does a really good job of running that gamut, like Pan's Labyrinth and stuff like that. I think
Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, Guillermo! Why did I say Benicio del Toro? Guillermo del Toro. Why did I? What?
They're both del Toros, and they're both great.
Yeah, they are
for very different reasons.
Guillermo del Toro. With Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth. Yes.
Yeah. I think that that really, you got to walk back from being too whimsical, because I think that it all comes back around as a dungeon master is like your players are going to inject all the farce you need into a D&D campaign, so you don't need to be the farce. Right?
Yeah. Lemon these names, sorry, they get me. Lemon Jelena Jolie asks, how would you make an incompetent villain? You have talked a lot about very smart, evil spellcasters, but what about villains that are not that smart or wise? Here's the trick. In my opinion, a smart or an incompetent villain will not rise to the power levels of being a BBEG in your campaign. And more often than not, if you do have an incompetent villain, they are the puppet to somebody smarter. Yep. So like if you have like the dumb brute as like one of the BBGs and they think they're all powerful, who else is working in the shadows? Who do they think? Like, you could make a play where you have the dumb brute who's like the big axe wielding idiot who's like, I kill things really good and nobody can defeat me in battle, and thus I will rule the world. And the person who they think is their henchman is some really intelligent person being like, yes, you will rule the world. I'm helping you rule the world as your henchman. Here's what I think we should do next. And they're actually the one pulling the strings.
I think that one of the other things that you can do, though, is you have to think about, okay, in order to be a villain needs to have leverage of some kind. Like, they need to have a malevolent want. And I think of characters who are bullies, like Joffrey from the Game of Thrones was not really he wasn't a competent ruler by any stretch, but he was a great villain. And it really just came down to the fact that he was just a bully and he was just awful, and he was surrounded by, but again, as you say, he was surrounded by people who legitimized his power, right?
Yes.
So a bully can just be a big hill giant, right? And it doesn't matter that they're dumb. Doesn't matter that they're not too bright. Maybe they're still a little bit smarter than the average hill giant, but they're strong and they're big and they got the muscle to throw around, right? And they can kind of just have this brute cunning to them. I think that if you're going all the way for incompetent, to me, when I hear the term incompetent villain, I think of something like Robotnik from Sonic the Hedgehog, or even like a Bowser type character. And I think of like a cartoon character villain. You know what I mean? Like the type of villain that, or like, you know, the type of villain that gets blown off into the distance, like Team Rocket or Dr. Claw or something like that. It's like, I'll get you next time, Gadget. So maybe like you want to look at cartoon villains, but I don't know if that's the tone that you want for your, like, if that's what you're looking for, like, look at villains from cartoons, and usually it's because like they're cowards who hide, they're cowardly bullies who hide, and they don't really have a very good plan, but they're just kind of lucky enough that it worked out for them.
I think if we go back to your Joffrey idea and kind of open that up a little bit more. I think what's really interesting about Joffrey is if you want an incompetent villain, put them in a position of power where people under them have to answer to them, and people above them are like, they'll sit on the throne while we do the heavy work. So you have the smarter people doing the actual evil work, while the incompetent ruler is just a big, stupid bully who is like, that person looked at me wrong, kill them. And people are like, oh, shoot, there he goes again, just being a stupid bad guy. But then you can have that person sit in their position of power being incompetent, but you have to have a few other people pulling a few other strings.
Yep. No name. Didn't get a name. That's okay. How do I deal with a player who refuses to interact with their backstory whatsoever? If a character strives to move away from their backstory, what do I do so they don't feel left out while the other players interact with things from their backstory?
I think you need to have a talk with this player about what they're hoping to get out of the game. If they're not engaging with their backstory, then what I actually think this means is they didn't write a backstory that they're interested enough in.
Yeah, remember there's more. A backstory isn't important. As long as the character has goals and motivations and things that are interesting to them. Maybe the character's past doesn't matter as much as the character's future does. And so the character wants to do things, accomplish things, and have things. But again, Kelly's right here. You got to talk to this player and find out actually what they want from the game, because maybe they actually don't care. Like maybe they won't feel left out when the other players interact with their backstory, because this player actually isn't really interested in that. You might just have a player that wants to hang out, fight some monsters and, crack some jokes, and that might be okay. So talk to them.
Yeah. Caleb asks, how would you run an encounter against Archegs when dealing with Ankegs?
Ankegs, yeah.
I can't read. When dealing with grappling and pulling PCs underground. I love grappling and pulling PCs underground.
I did it with a purple worm. Worms, yeah, they're great for like doing the whole bite, grab, pull. I feel like Ankegs aren't quite big enough for this. You kind of need like a monster that has a burrow speed and swallow. It's really brutal. Like if the monster comes up from underground and immediately makes a run for it afterwards, like that can just be, oh, that player's character's dead now.
Yeah, I usually give a chance. Like if the player is dragged underground, I would probably grant that player on their next turn an option to try to break free or escape, and then they need to spend their turn after that digging their way out, or the other characters need to help dig them out. I would try to avoid an instant death scenario unless we were at like level 17 and they get eaten by a purple worm. Then you know what, at this point, if you got eaten by a purple worm and you're level 17, that's your own fault.
Yeah.
So
Professor Spam wants to know, I'm doing a D&D mystery themed campaign for Halloween. What would be your tips on how to incorporate a villain into a mystery themed campaign? I would just as a heads up, if you're running this as a one-shot, mysteries are really hard to do for one-shots. So just be careful, because if you're trying to do a Halloween one-shot mystery, you might run out of time.
You could make it like a limited, like I did run a mystery once, but the mystery was like you're in a puzzle castle and you got to find the secret hidden treasure. And that was the mystery, is it was more a group of puzzles. I think that if you are running a mystery, a great way to look at it to build your mystery is big craze right now. A lot of people are loving real life serial killer documentaries of like how the cops caught this serial killer. Go
ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, like, when you watch those, it's all about leaving the clues and what the villain's goal was. but then what the villain leaves behind. If you're trying to build a villain into this, they're probably they have a plan, they have something that they're trying to accomplish, but then along the way they've made a few minor errors. Whenever I'm watching one of those documentaries and it's like, we found a footprint at this location, and then 2 months later we found the same footprint at a different location, then we were starting to able to piece these together, and then you start to draw those questions of what is the modus operandi of the villain at play? What is their goal? What are they constantly doing? What is their repetition? And I think that these sort of things are great for a villain in a mystery. Is what pieces have they left that the players can put together, and what is the villain's goal, and what are they trying to accomplish in secret that they don't want to be discovered for?
Yeah, I think another thing that you could pull on is the Saw films, and just steal Jigsaw and do
the first Saw film.
Yeah, the first Saw film. I haven't seen the rest of them actually. But yeah, you can have that kind of like, hello, would you like to play a game sort of character who where the characters are invited into a very specific location. Like, you are now trapped in a haunted house. The villain is going to torment you. Like, I mean, everything from Curse of Strahd is basically that model of you are now in the villain's lair. The villain has power here. They're going to trick you. They're going to torment you. And will you survive to get out by morning? Right. And the mystery is, and you could also pull on, some Scooby-Doo influences maybe, and, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain sort of stuff there if you wanted to be a little bit silly. But, yeah, the other thing with a villain in a mystery campaign is the villain can leave notes. The villain is always one step ahead of the players. They're playing that cat and mouse catch up, like Detective Story, Moriarty, and Sherlock Holmes sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
From there, do we want to move into the Dragonheim questions?
Yeah, let's go over to the we got some cool questions from about Dragonheim stuff. Let's grab those. I'll just organize these.
So once we're done the Dragonheim questions, we're going to be opening it up to chat. We just have a few more to get through. Yeah. We're going to be going until 8:00, so we should have some time at the end. But we do want to hit our Patreon questions.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. So, of course, we did just wrap up the Dragonheim Kickstarter only a few weeks ago. So yeah. Let's see how that all worked out. Did that sort things properly? Oh no, I need to go the other way. There we go.
Reveal, not conceal.
Yeah.
So Adam J, we're back to you. Asks, "Hi dudes, I was wondering how easy the book would slide into an existing Dragonheim campaign. I've already started my own Dragonheim campaign based on my watch-through knowledge of the live stream." What I'm going to say to that is, if you're already running Dragonheim, let your players know that the official book is coming, and that some adjustments might need to be made when the book arrives. If you're running based on the live stream, I'm sure that there's probably a lot of questions about what if your players joined a faction other than the ones we went with in our show, and things of that nature. Once you get the book, you can kind of fine tune, and I would say that it should be relatively easy to pick up from wherever you are in the campaign. Find that spot in the book and kind of work your way forward. Yeah. Now incorporating the actual book.
I think that you're going to find you might run into a few of the things that we fixed in the book that are different. Yeah, because we definitely changed things, and it might be worthwhile for us. We've talked about putting out this FAQ document for Dragonheim, and possibly including as part of that FAQ, as a PDF or something, what are the key things that are different from the show, that might trip you up. I think the biggest thing, there's a few big things that I think you're gonna waffle around on. If you did back the campaign And you do have the playtest is now available, so you can get the new map of the city, and you can get all the rules for contamination and stuff that are in the playtest form, and you can start using all those. So you got that consistency there. I would say that I would almost say finish your campaign, and as you finish your campaign, what you should do is look at our book as suggestions and ideas. And if we change something that affects what your players have done, don't try to change it back. Like, leave it the way that it is. You're probably going to be fine. I think that I can't speak to what you've done, right? Like, for example, I remember reading about somebody who, did also try writing a Dragonheim campaign, and I think in their campaign, like, the meteor was sent by demons. That's not what it is in the book, but if that's what you've done, sure, work with it, roll with it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you've made like some big decisions about like the background of the world and like what happened, that might be the biggest thing that like throws you for a loop, because there's like some secrets that are there. But no, I like, it's very modular overall, the whole book, right? Like, depending on the pace of your campaign, like, even if you've changed details about the setting or the plot or the characters, like, if your characters haven't explored the Academy Tower yet, you're going to be able to use the entirety of the Academy Tower. If they haven't gone to Castle Draken, you're going to be able to use the entirety of Castle Draken. If they haven't visited any of these locations yet, you're going to be able to use it, all of it. You just might have to like change and massage some of the details, and you're probably going to do that anyways. So I would say you're going to be fine to use what you use. Like, yeah, maybe it turns out that you reverse engineered the rat's nest, and it's not the same as it is in the book or whatever, but it's still close enough. That doesn't matter. Your players have done that part, right?
Yeah.
So
Branish asks, in Dragonheim, how should I deal with my players using Leomund's tiny hut? Can they use it for a long rest in the haze? No, they cannot, and this is explicitly stated in our playtest as well as in the book. There is no hiding from the haze, no spell that is available to you on the outset of the campaign. Or like, no spell. The only spells that will help you are ones that you have to learn in the campaign itself.
Like, Leomund's tiny hut will be a barrier. Like, the spell works. The spell just doesn't block the haze. Like, that's just that. Like, it just doesn't let you. So, like, if your players want to camp out overnight in Dragonheim in a Leomund's tiny hut, they can, and the Leomund's tiny hut will protect them from the monsters, but it won't protect them from the haze.
Yeah. The haze is very much a mechanic, and very simply, to answer all questions about can I do X, Y, or Z to avoid the haze, the contamination, and the dangerous effects of delirium, the answer is usually that these are things that the campaign is designed for you to have to find the solutions to. That is the story of Dragonheim. The campaign is about finding the solutions to these problems. So rope trick doesn't work either. I know that we allowed it in the show. That has been redone.
Yeah.
The point of the haze and the contamination and all of that is to make the players have to solve through playing in the campaign.
And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and this is a minor spoiler for the show, but the haze is called the haze, but the effect of the haze, the fog, the mist, is not the haze. It's an effect of the haze, but it's not the haze. It's not the thing. The fog is not the thing that's stopping you from taking a long rest. It's caused by the same thing that is causing you to not be able to take a benefit from a long rest, but the fog isn't the source of that it is. The fog is a byproduct of it.
So hopefully that answers the question. Very simply, it's our way of implementing a system that makes the players have to deal with things in stages. They need to deal with the outer ruins first, discover how they're going to get to the inner ruins, discover how they're going to find a safe place in the inner ruins, and then discover how they're going to get to the castle. These tiers are built on purpose, and the idea of the haze and the contamination and all of that is to make players have to progress, so they can't just, all right, start of the campaign, we're heading to Castle Draken.
Yeah, there was a great story from one of our playtesters that was like, so my group tried to go all the way to the middle of the city and back again, and it took their characters, they stealthed in, it took them hours and hours, and they were going up against forced marches. And I'm like, your characters tried to go from the outskirts of the city to the middle of the city and back again in one expedition? Well, no wonder it was hard. It's supposed to be. Right?
By the time, so in our book, by the time characters are making their way to the middle of the city, they have faction alliances. They have faction strongholds that they may be able to use. They've probably secured one or two places in the city that they could use to rest and branch out.
Or the clock tower.
Yeah,
right?
The clock tower. So like the clock tower is a major point. Once you've acquired the clock tower, now you have a place to get to that you can now take a long rest and then work your way further into the city from there. This is very much on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just so you know, this artwork behind me is on the DM screen, and it is very much designed so that during the game you can point and be like, this is where that thing is. Yeah.
Cameron asks, the boons from the factions really piqued my interest. Is there any chance you can go over the basic benefits of every faction? If there are any examples from each faction, that would be awesome. If not, just general bonuses that are known as sweet. I think we can give a general kind of idea on what each faction's sort of vibe is on the boons that they offer.
Yeah. So the hooded lanterns tell you where their hidden supply caches are that have like extra ammo, healing potions, and are usually like safe places to take a short rest in the ruins. They can also give you things like flare guns to signal for a patrol if you need help.
Yeah, they're very militarized. So if you think of like military style boons, you're probably on the right track. What would a military offer troops going into dangerous territory?
Yeah.
When we think of the Silver Order, this one's interesting because somebody brought up, well, if we're going on delirium hunts and trying to gather delirium to sell, but we're working with the Silver Order, then we won't make as much money. Interestingly enough, the factions that don't want you selling delirium are also the factions that can offer you healing and a lot of rejuvenation and very important spells that will help you survive.
Yes, because the NPCs in the Silver Order and the followers of the Falling Fire are the ones that can cast spells like Greater Restoration and Heal and Raise Dead. So if you are working with these factions, you'll be able to benefit from their divine spellcasters that are part of the organization. Of course, with the Silver Order as well, the Silver Order will give you mounts. If you're really good with the Silver Order, they'll give you griffins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have a few really cool sort of strength options to add to your party, like mounts. If you're planning to storm a Knoll stronghold, and you're allied with the Silver Order, that's going to be helpful. They have a lot of troops on their side as well. So, but the Silver Order, think about troops and healing. And mounts. With the Falling Fire, think about even more healing and protection from the haze.
With the Falling Fire, of course, you can be invited to take the sacrament as well.
Yes.
But if you decide to take the sacrament of the Falling Fire, that's a major commitment. And it comes with some serious role-playing requirements as well.
Yeah. Now we have the Queensmen and the Amethyst Academy. The Amethyst Academy is a pretty easy one. They're going to offer you magic items, spells, scrolls, potions.
Usually you're going to get consumable magic items from the Amethyst Academy. They'll kind of outfit you with like a scroll, or if you need reinforcements, they might give you an elemental gem in high-end things, and they obviously you can get permanent magic items from them as well. And with the Queen of Thieves, she'll steal some magic items for you. You can get some poisons through the Queen of Thieves as well. And the Queen of Thieves can also tell you how to get through the sewers faster, so you can actually get around in Dragonheim a little bit easier too.
Yeah, one of the fun things with the Queen of Thieves is that the sewers are actually a really dangerous method of transportation, but the Queen of Thieves knows all the secret passages.
Yep.
So there's some ideas.
And of course, all the factions do have the ability for their best operatives. You can either get something along the lines of a one of the tomes or manuals that boost a stat by 2 and go above 20, or like they'll give you training and you can learn a feat from them as well. Yeah.
So pick an appropriate feat.
Yeah.
Hazel Menno, I probably said that horribly wrong, asks, my question is on summoning spells within the haze and deep haze. Would they work? Could you summon a standard familiar while inside the haze, or would you have to summon them before going in? In essence, does all conjuration fail in the haze? No, conjuration works fine.
No. The haze conjures tons of stuff on its own.
Yeah. In the book, there are words that say that like there's rules about teleportation and divination, but specifically teleportation and divination work. But think of the city like a bubble. You can't teleport in and you can't teleport out, but you can teleport within.
Yeah, and you can still summon creatures. Like the intent is to not make you not be able to use your summoning spells.
No, we want you to play the character you want to play. The only limitations are we don't want you to be in Emberwood Village and teleport to the castle. We want you to have to think about how the heck you're going to get there. So you need, that's the only limitation, is like, also like you can't scry on the Queen of Thieves inside. That's why she lives inside of the haze. That's why so you can't divine her.
Yeah. And chat, if you want to start posting some questions for us, let us know. Just put capital letters questions so we can track that. We only got a few more questions to go here. Jason wants to know, I skimmed over the playtest material. Why did you decide to use the chapter for that release? How was that decision made? Kelly and I talked about it, and we went over everything in the book, and we said we don't want to spoil the story. So we gave that chapter because it would let you explore the city and try out the new mechanics, but we didn't want to like ruin any of the story and stuff like that. And we didn't want, we wanted the focus to be on the mechanics, not this encounter is not balanced.
Yeah. The reason why we picked the chapter we did, also, Hassel Me Not. Thank you for telling me how to pronounce your name. But yeah, we wanted the exploration rules to be the forefront, and the contamination, the random encounters. So we picked the chapter that was very much designed for DMs and players to learn those mechanics. The whole reason that there is a delirium hunt in the first place is to say, oh, it's your first foray into the city. Let's learn how the city works. And so we released that. There's no story elements. And that way we're just messing around with mechanics.
Yeah. We're very happy with the adventure sites as well. And ultimately we felt that like we debated over releasing the Rat's Nest. But ultimately we decided, we felt that would, and maybe we still might, that was the only other candidate. Everything else, it's so interconnected that like we wanted, it's one of those things where it's like, you either have to have everything. It's like, yeah.
Will the Dragonheim miniatures be beginner friendly to paint? I think some of them, they're you actually have beginner, medium, and difficult minis in there. The delirium dregs, paint them however the heck you want. If they look like garbage, guess what? They're supposed to.
They're horrible, ugly mutants. And actually with the delirium dregs, I think all you're going to need to do what I would do with the delirium dregs is get Games Workshop Pallid Witch Flesh and and like a purple wash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you start with actually the Games Workshop contrast paints would be really good with them as well, right? And like you can just go like gory and bloody, and doing gory bloody stuff with the dregs, it's easy and it's fun because you can kind of just slop the paint on and you get to see the effect of what a wash does. So it'll be really easy to paint those. The Executioner is a big mini, but he's going to be easy to paint because you just prime him black, dry brush him with a good metallic paint, and then hit him with Agrax Earthshade to do some rust and wash, and then probably what's the color? It's not Druchii Violet. There's a Games Workshop purple wash, and you're gonna want like a purple wash to do a lot of stuff for this.
I think the hardest ones are going to be the faction leaders, because I actually find people to be the hardest thing to paint. But like the Lord of the Feast, you're going to want to do like paint them gray, dry brush some white or brown tips onto the fur, and you're most of the way there. I think that they are going to be pretty beginner friendly. Yeah. How do we feel? Should we move to chat?
Yeah, let's start grabbing some questions from chat. What do we got? I think we already got a few good ones in here.
Yeah. What do you want to start with?
Ooh. Robert Bell wants to know, I love fantasy maps. How did you go about creating the map for your city? So Dragonheim's map has a two-stage process. If you're asking about the brand new map, that was drawn by John Robertson. John Stevenson. John Stevenson is our cartographer that did the Dragonheim map, but that was based on a map that originally I used a random city generator. I'll have to post the links for it, but it's a really awesome city generator. And then Photoshop. So a lot like. There's no other software beyond that. When John did the map, he drew it by hand, but he was using the original map that I made as a template, and then he made that with it's digital art and paint.
Eric Payne asks, when will the book be available for purchase? It's available for pre-order right now on the Ghostfire website.
Dragonheim.com will take you right there.
Dragonheim.com.
Yep.
So if you go to Dragonheim.com, you can actually pre-order the book. They won't be delivered until after we've fulfilled all of our Kickstarter deliveries. But yeah, it's available for purchase.
Yeah. Awesome.
Night Raven asks, how does the book handle a party of characters that don't need a long rest to get key abilities back, like monks, warlocks, and fighters, seeing as these characters can last longer in the ruins?
They will be able to last longer in the ruins. That will just be an advantage for them. If you have a whole party that is a fighter, a warlock, a rogue, and a monk, hey, awesome.
No matter what, everybody needs to take a long rest at some point, and every party has its advantages. Like a fighter, rogue, warlock, and monk party, it has some other glaring weaknesses. So, like, it's a balance, right? And what I found when we were playing our first stream, we had a rogue, a fighter, and me playing a sorcerer. And yes, there are occasions where I ran out of spell slots and we had to retreat. But usually when we were pulling a retreat anyway, it wasn't that the fighter and the rogue were out of abilities. It was that we were all pretty low on hit points as well and needed a rest. And I find that Dragonheim kind of just seems to balance itself out in these cases.
Benny in the Jets wants to know, can you guys do a brief ranking of the BBEGs that you've used on your players? I've used a lot of BBEGs on my players. So Benny also asked top 3. My top 3 villains I've ever done, I would say, are Azar Cool from the Red Hand of Doom, the Queen of Thieves, and the Queen of Thieves. What was another really good one? What do you think, Kelly? What was a really good villain?
Oh man. Okay, yeah, there was the Red Hand of Doom. There was you know what? I got to throw it to I'm forgetting his name now. The Rune Keeper from the first campaign I ever played. The
Rise of the Rune Lords. Yeah, the Rune Lord. Yeah, that was great. Oh yeah, he was awesome. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've ran a handful of BBGs, and Tiamat was a lot of fun. Running Tiamat was a blast. One that I created, actually, same campaign. So I ran Tyranny of Dragons, but Rezmir died very early on. So I invented Rezmir's son, who tormented the players for months and months. And I actually loved doing that. I also got to throw it out to the Demogorgon. Running the Demogorgon as a final boss was it was a good time. I had a good time with that one. What was the most fun part of the book for you? That's a tough one. The whole thing. Different parts were fun for I loved. What I will say was the most fun, not necessarily part, but the most fun thing that occurred. And I've said this before, but there were days that Monty and I would come, and one of us we'd come into the basement. One of us would have an idea, but it wasn't a good idea. Like I'll use a chapter from the book. I came into Monty's basement the one day and was like, I feel like there should be dwarves and they should be mining delirium, but I don't know where to go with this. And Monty was like, what if the dwarves were here doing this? And I was like, oh, and what if they had this? And we would just start this thing where we would just start yelling ideas back and forth, jotting it down. And suddenly by the end of it, we were like, wow, we just wrote some really cool stuff for this book.
Yep. The best part, the most fun part was hanging out with my friend all day.
We made some sweet jazz during the operation of making this book. It was great.
Cool. Okay. What, Zach Harrison, what advice can you offer for running a one-on-one or duet campaign? I cannot offer you any real advice because I have only ever done it once and I wasn't really happy with the results.
I'm in the same boat. I ran a session for my partner, and I tried to use the mechanics for having a sidekick. Yeah. But I still felt like I didn't even like using the sidekick.
I felt with, at least with the game that I ran with Kirsten, I think that I probably should not have used D&D for it, because she wanted to basically do like an investigative thing. I think that if I was going to run a one shot with Kirsten, I would probably run more like an investigative mystery thing, like based on the gumshoe system or something, because that's what she wants to do. Like basically, like we sat down and we were playing, and she's like, oh, you want to just play the Dresden Files. Like, we just want to make up Dresden Files together. Like, that was what it came out to. So it also really depends on who the other person is. So yeah, haven't really done too much on that. Yeah. Scarlett wants to know, would you consider a Dragonheim miniature painting video or stream?
Yes, I actually would. I'm very much thinking about this. My partner paints minis quite well, and she's done a few painting streams with a few other creators. And so we were chatting about whether or not we wanted to do like a Dragonheim mini painting stream at some point, or like even Monty and I doing one. Jill also paints minis. We know a lot of actual, we know a lot of people in the mini painting community, and it would be a lot of fun. I
think we could rig it up pretty good to get some like zoomed in cameras and stuff on it too. I think that would be awesome. Let's see.
My players are risk adverse, choose less risky, less rewarding routes to pursue. What are some ways of compelling players to more risky and ultimately more rewarding gameplay for all of us? Tough. I think this is tough because if all of your players are risk adverse, then there is a style of D&D that they might be enjoying that might be opposed to the style of D&D that you enjoy. I actually know, so oddly enough, Monty and I play really well together. But I know that Monty, not necessarily risk adverse, but Monty likes to analyze things and find the best course of action that will avoid. If Monty told me once that if he can avoid all combat and outdo all the enemies without taking a point of damage, he feels like he's won. Me, on the other hand, I am, what's the opposite of risk adverse? I'm attracted to risk.
Yes, you are a risk taker. Yes.
I love, like, oh, is there a trap in this hallway? Maybe I should run down the hallway and find out. Like, I'm the wildest player. I just love stirring the pot. But oddly enough, Monty and I understand each other, and Monty's okay when I do stir the pot, and I'm okay when he comes up with a clever plan not to. And sometimes there's that back and forth. So if you're the DM who wants to push into risk, but your players are risk adverse, maybe find ways to somewhat reward them for avoiding the risks.
Also, I just want to point out there's a really interesting thing here that Walter Shields posted that kind of relates to this, where he's asked, is there a mechanism in place to discourage PCs from heading away from Dragonheim entirely? And on the question of like risk aversion, the mechanism in place is this is the campaign, right? And there is a certain point where you have to say to your players, like, there is no such thing as no risk. The D&D is a game about taking risks. D&D is a game about being a heroic adventurer who takes risks. There is no such thing as a foolproof plan. And so, like with Walter, one of the things that actually, to your question, we actually have a session 0 guide in the place that actually says, during session 0, you need to say to your players, this is the way it works. You stay in Dragonheim. You stay in the city. It's about exploring the city, and no element of the plot is meant to go leave the city. Basically, we say if your characters feel that they should leave the city, that character is retired until they return. And so if you have players that are so risk averse, you might just need to actually have the conversation with them and say, actually, you guys, because often I find the same thing. It's even happened recently with Kelly, Jill, and Joe. It's like, you guys are just overthinking it a little bit too much, right? It's like you have to say, sometimes the players, in their desire to eliminate all risk, do not do anything and need to be reminded, you're not going to be able to get us into a situation where you're not going to have to risk something. This is going to be hard. That's why it's interesting. You can have the question is not whether you're going to succeed. Like, it's always about, you're going to be able to do this, but how hard are you going to make it for yourself? And sometimes players, I'll actually say this. I have seen players spend game sessions overcomplicating an issue and actually inadvertently making the situation for themselves worse because they didn't want to confront a problem head on. Mm-hmm. and sometimes that's it. Like sometimes it's not. It's like, if you have a castle and you want to attack a castle, and you're like, should we attack this castle? Well, the other thing that a lot of players forget is the more time you go trying to get allies, the longer you are giving the defenders of the castle to prepare for your assault.
Stop. Just stop.
So, if you want to gallivant off for 3 or 4 days and get some allies, well, maybe the villains are going to gallivant off for 3 or 4 days and get some allies of their own.
You're killing me right now, man. You're killing me. Shadows of Dragonheim, by the way. Fun. We're having a lot of fun. This actually leans into, there's another question here from Heath. How do you recommend handling cautious parties that retreat and take long rests a lot? Are there time-sensitive objectives in the campaign adventures?
The villains are ready for them next time. Like, that's just it.
Also, if you're talking specifically about Dragonheim, if your players are retreating every time they take a few wounds or get one level of contamination, they're not going to get anywhere. they're not going to accomplish anything.
Yeah.
So the game actually pushes them to go further and further into the ruins and figure out what they're going to do to deal with that. So risk-adverse players are going to have to deal with the risks at some point. Otherwise, they're not able to play the campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like, sometimes you just eventually you have to roll the dice.
Where do you start when building a new world? I start with an inn. It all starts in a tavern.
Yeah, it starts with when you are building a new world, it starts with the first little town and the first little dungeon, and for me it starts with the player characters. Right? And what is the story? Like, what is the story that I want to explore? What are the themes and ideas that I want to explore here?
So I was writing a homebrew world, and I'm not precious about this homebrew world. I'm willing to talk about it. So when I was sitting down to create my homebrew world, the first thing I said is, I want the dwarves dug too deep. I love that. And accidentally opened up a gateway to the Shadowfell that let undead pour into the world. That's my plot. Mm-hmm. I don't really know what's going to happen with that yet. But then I was like, okay, that's where it's going to end. Now we go over here. This is the city we started. Yep. And this is where we first hear about the problem. And that's where I started. And the rest of the world, I fleshed out piece by piece. But you start with, what's the main conflict? And where do we start?
Things that you don't need to start with. You do not need to decide how the world was created. You do not need to make a list of every god. You don't need to make a complete history of your world that stretches back since the world began. You don't need to know even what happened 100 years ago. You don't even need to know what's on the other side of the ocean, or even what's on the other side of the forest. All you really need is what your players are going to experience in the next handful of game sessions. And if you are just starting out building fantasy worlds for D&D, that's where you should begin. If you're thinking about building worlds that you're going to write novels in, that you're going to write bigger stories in, I have no advice for you because I've never done that, right? But for me, the worlds always, even all the worlds that I built, like, they've started small. Like Westamar, I didn't have a map of Westamar that Dragonheim is in until after the first season of the original Dragonheim campaign. Didn't exist. Mm-hmm. Right? It just did. I knew that there was Westamar, Caspia, and Illyria, but like Caspia and Illyria were like one. Like, I had one city. I didn't even have a city written down for Caspia. Like, we made that all up after the fact. Like, Joe just spearheaded that. I just knew that the capital of Illyria was Lumen. I didn't really know anything else about Illyria than that. And so, like, you figure it out as you go along. Let it grow organically. Let your players influence it. You don't have to do everything from the beginning.
I'm going to answer this question. Why did you turn the card around? Spoilers for Shadows, but I'm going to be spoiler free here. I turned the card around because I didn't want to lead a bunch of really scary villains into my unprepared allies. And my end goal was to end up there anyway. So I still think that oddly things are working out the way that I originally wanted them to. We're just taking a very scenic route to get there. But that's why I turned the card around. I thought about my allies and said, drawing this situation to them right now might lose us something. And I'd rather deal with the situation myself. It may have been a bad choice, but that's what went through my head. Mm-hmm. That's why I made the choice I did. And you know what? When you're put on the spot playing D&D, sometimes you make silly choices that later you think about and you're like, why did I make that choice? That's how D&D works. And guess what? Unfortunately, especially when we're playing a live play, I have to deal a lot with the silly choices that I made when I was in the moment and kind of, I guess, flustered at the situation and just picked whatever came to my head.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the map of Westamar, yeah, we'll probably release a map. You can pause some of our live streams for like my work in progress map. But from what I understand, the plan is that when you get the book of Dragonheim, when you open the front cover of the book, like where normally like in many books is nothing, the front cover will be the map of Dragonheim. The back cover will be the map of Westamar on the inside covers. And so eventually we're going to release the map of Westamar when that map is done by a professional cartographer and not me. so that's when it'll probably happen there.
Somebody asks, will you ever eventually do a poll for who has the best beard? We won't, because Monty has the best beard.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I would vote for you. I'm not voting for me. I grow a beard, but your beard's supreme.
Although you did a really good mustache a while ago. Remember that? Well, yeah, that Wilhelm
I can
mustache.
bring it back.
Yeah.
Although I'll bring it back once I actually grow the mustache back. Thanks. What are each of your favorite classes? I love this question.
It's wizards, obviously. My favorite class is wizard.
So far, I've been surprised by this. My favorite is sorcerer.
I also really like bards. Yeah.
I need to play, like, I thrive in a charisma-based class, but mine was wizards for a while, but I also thrive in a charisma-based class. So what do you get when you combine wizards and charisma? You get a sorcerer.
Yeah.
So sorcerer speaks to both my desire to be a spellcaster and my desire for high charisma. I do think that I need to play a bard at some point long term, because I feel like that could rival the sorcerer. Because but sorcerer is my favorite. Paladins are a close second. We have about 10 minutes left, a little over 10 minutes. Question, before Dragonheim, did you guys have your own reoccurring homebrew world? Fun fact, you've heard us mention the city campaign a lot. And what I will say is that Dragonheim is actually a reskinning of a previous combined effort world that Monty and I made, where we ran what was called the city campaign.
Yeah, and also, like, there's a loose continuity, kind of. Like, I feel like there's a loose continuity between all of my worlds, but it's... I would actually say that, like, that by far and away, like, the Dragonheim world is my most sophisticated. Like, before that, I really didn't have a fantasy. Like, I did one in high school, and then I ran a lot of my games in Eberron. And then I didn't really worry about my campaign settings after that for a while. Like, I just kind of either ran, like, it's set in one city and it doesn't matter what the wider world is, or it's set in the Elser Vale and it's Red Hand of Doom, or it's just in the Forgotten Realms. So this is really, like, and I would definitely say to this that, like, that came out of an urge. Like, a question that we started to get a lot from a lot of people is, like, can we stream Dragonheim and stuff like that? And I can't actually give an answer to that question because I don't know what the question about, like, giving permission to, like, stream stuff is really weird. But I would say for anyone considering streaming, it's really worth it to stream your own homebrew. It really is worth it. Like, if you want an opportunity to work on your own homebrew stuff, doing a stream gives you a really good reason to develop your work to a higher level. And so I highly recommend it. Right. So, like, I'm very flattered that people are asking about, like, streaming Dragonheim and streaming it. And, you know, basically it occupies that same, like, no one gets permission from Wizard of the Coast to live stream Curse of Strahd. Right? Wizard of the Coast doesn't give you permission to do that. No, like, technically speaking, if you lie, and it's actually very questionable what if Wizard of the Coast didn't want people to live stream Curse of Strahd, what they would do. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. Like, technically speaking, any video game streamer, the publisher of that video game could possibly stop them from doing it, but nobody does. So, but I would say that if you are interested in streaming D&D, really strongly consider your own homebrew stuff. It's a really great way to develop your own material. And I found for myself as a dungeon master, the experience of streaming what I created, it made it really valuable.
A few good ones in here. I like this question. This one's easy. Does Haze Walker Plate work in the deep haze? It's designed for the deep haze. That's its big purpose. Favorite subclass for your favorite class?
Ooh, I'm really into the idea of playing a Blade Singer.
I know you are.
Yeah,
I think yours used to be the Diviner.
Yeah,
but you've been pumped for a Blade Singer. I used to be all about Shadow Sorcerer. They were my favorite. But I think if I had another opportunity, it would be Aberrant Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or Vengeance Paladin, if we're looking at the second option.
Yep. Do handcuffs prevent somatic components? I would say yes. I think they do.
Yeah, I feel like there needs to okay, imagine when I think of somatic components, I think of Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And he needs a whole bunch of space to do his somatic components.
I would also say that the intent behind handcuffs is to restrain, right? And so someone that puts handcuffs on a spellcaster, doesn't a lot of people have this think that there's kind of two schools of thought regarding magic. I think there's one school of thought that magic is it doesn't really matter what the gestures are. It doesn't really matter what the words are. You just kind of have to twiddle your fingers and mutter something under your breath. So I could cast fireball by going burn, burn, burn. But the other thought behind magic, which is the one that I've subscribed to, is magic is really precise. You have to stretch your hands out 3 feet away, twist your hands 90 degrees, and say in a very specific intonation, Inferno Combustion Engine, in order to cast fireball, because you're actually playing the notes of reality. And so the verbal and somatic components, it matters. And if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have cast the spell.
I think advice for everybody out there. You don't even have to read the whole series, but if you can read a passage from the Dresden Files where Harry Dresden casts a spell and explains what goes into it, it actually changed the way that I role-played spellcasters in Dungeons and Dragons. He talks about the will, the amount of effort, the reason why you use words, why he recommends using a made-up word rather than an existing word. There's reasoning for all of the things that Harry Dresden does when he casts a spell, and it's actually beautiful to read. And it influenced my role-playing forever.
But Harry Dresden, I'm sure... I don't know, I'm not enough in the series, but Harry Dresden's been in handcuffs a bunch of times. Does he ever get to cast spells when he's wearing handcuffs?
I feel like he can do cantrips, maybe.
Yeah. So I feel like the answer to this question, because obviously handcuffs are the closest thing in the rules are manacles, right? And obviously the intent with these is to bind a person so they can't use their hands in some way, shape, or form. So I think as a DM, you just have to read into the intents of things like that. And I don't know. They have,
when somebody captures Harry Dresden, they handcuff him, gag him, and take away all of his items. Yeah. Which is what you do in D&D with a spellcaster.
Exactly. So and I think that the counter argument for it, I think is it's spellcasters get to break the rules all the time. Why are we making it easier for them? You know what I mean? Right. In general, I'm in favor of being more strict with spellcasters, not less, because spellcasters in general already get to mess around with things, right? That's my logic as a DM.
What was the biggest surprise players ever gave you as a DM?
Every time we play. That's why I play D&D, is to be surprised by the players. I'm surprised all the time. Yeah. I want to piggyback on that comment and say it's really hard for me to pick one specific time, because
it's beautiful when I think I know the direction that a story is going to take, and then the players come up with something that I never even considered, and it's always my favorite moment. We only have 5 minutes left, so let's just take a couple more questions here.
Yeah. Thoughts on the Tash's Battlemaster maneuvers? They're a waste of space. There's no new Battlemaster maneuvers. We actually said this in our review. Those Battlemaster builds that were published in Tash's Cauldron of Everything were...
Was there no new Battlemaster?
I don't think there were new maneuvers. I don't think there were any new... No, there were no new maneuvers. They were just Battlemaster builds. And I found it actually kind of insulting. I thought it was a waste of page space.
I mean, we did a whole video about Battlemaster build guide and all of that, so...
Yeah, there was a lot of other things I would have rather had there. I think we talked about this in another section of the book where like there was... Yeah, like didn't we say this in our review of the Psychic Warrior, where we were like, why did they give all this section of Battlemaster builds when they could have given more varied things to do with the Psychic Warrior? Yeah,
no, there are new maneuvers. There's ambush, bait and switch, brace, commanding presence, grappling strike.
Oh, there are new ones.
Tactical assessment. Yes, I do remember seeing this. Okay,
then there are. I thought the question was referring to the Battlemaster builds. My apologies.
The Battlemaster maneuvers are decent, but I actually don't think many of them beat the ones that I already love. I think I'm a little foggy, so I can't really, unless I were to read them right now, but that would literally use the rest of our time. But I will say that I still think things like Trip Attack and what are some of the other great ones?
Maybe
Precision Strike. Those are so key.
I guess we probably should do some videos where we look at the new alternate class features in Tash's.
Well, when we're done ranking the classes, we can do class feature videos. Yeah. I do actually remember looking at these and reading them and thinking they were neat. But yeah, I have other favorites still.
Yeah. So I think with that we're almost at the end of our time. So I think that's where we'll call it for now for questions. But what an eclectic mix of questions tonight.
I had a lot of fun. Oddly enough, I had a lot of fun talking about favorite books and stuff like that. So, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this whole thing. I love these Q&As, and I hope all of you there enjoy doing these as well. Because really, this is how Dungeon Dudes started. Dungeon Dudes started with Monty and I sitting together at lunches, asking each other weird hypothetical D&D questions and answering each other.
Yep.
That's when we decided maybe we should turn on some cameras and answer questions for other people. And so this really just brings me back to the lunchroom with Monty and I, but we're answering just like fun D&D and nerdy questions.
The days of the computer shop. We are so far away from that now.
Yeah. But yeah, always appreciate the time. And thank you all so much for participating with us this evening. And I hope that we get to hang out again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Be sure to check out, if you haven't already, we got our live streams Tuesday nights where we're back playing in the basement, Shadows of Dragonheim. We got our Patreon as well, where you can hop on our Discord. That's at patreon.com/dungeon_dudes. And if you did back our Kickstarter project, you got to get your backer kit survey in by September 6th. I think that's the lock off date. If you missed out on the Kickstarter, you can pre-order at dragonheim.com as well. Ratlings do have a burrow speed. It's just very slow. It's explained in the read the playtest. Ratlings do have a burrow speed. They can burrow. It's explained in the book. We'll get to that. But thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
In the dungeon.
Yeah.